Perfect. So it's recording. So thank you so much for joining us today. Eric, Trevor, a huge thank you. It's such a pleasure to do kind of like a phase two of the session we had with Eric a couple of weeks ago. So thanks for doing this exercise again. Maybe I will let you introduce yourself, so it will be easier for the group to know who you are and why we're having this session today. I don't know, Eric, if you want to
Sure,
start.
yeah, maybe I'll go first. Hi, everybody. Eric Mattson. I'm a partner with Excellere Partners. We're a Denver-based private equity fund. While tech-enabled business services is one of our thesis areas, I am not a technologist. I think that my interest and pursuit of all things AI, both for the firm and for our portfolio and for me personally, is just comes from the realization that it's an important thing for us to all have competency around as we think about how business is going to function going forward. So as a result of that, I had a chance to kind of have a chance introduction to Fabien, and it's turned into sort of this collaboration that we're on to spread the word. So glad to be here today and look forward to the conversation.
Hi, I'm Trevor Johnson. I was the former CEO of a company called Flagship Biosciences, where we used AI to focus on biomarkers for clinical trials applications, mostly just looking at the data to find which patients were the right fit for which trials in the oncology and rare disease space. Currently, I'm actually working as a consultant where I'm helping a lot of companies figure out an AI strategy. It's one of those things where everybody needs to figure it out and nobody really quite knows how to do it. And so I'm trying to help people really understand how their unique data sets or unique capabilities can be translated into value through AI. And so that's what I've been working on. In my background, I actually am from the technical side. I'm an engineer by training. I actually built my first neural network 20 years ago. So it's really exciting to me to see where AI is today and where it's going to be in the future.
Awesome. So again, huge thank you and for the entire group. So that's kind of like the first meeting that we're having as a community. The objective is really like AI for like PE. So it's really like how are we using AI for portfolio company? How are we using AI for P as a firm? What are the good use cases? Which one are working? Which ones are not working? And by the way, feel free. I mean, it's a community, so tell me, what is great, what is not great, what we can do, what you are expecting, and we will do our best to accommodate that. So, as mentioned, maybe first question that is very relevant. Eric, would you mind sharing with the group? I know that at Excellere, as you mentioned, you really want to push your portfolio company to invest around AI and to invest in this technology. So where do you start and what you do as a firm?
So I have this little saying that if you've met one private equity firm, you've met one private equity firm. And I think it even goes a step further that if you've met one private equity partner, you've met one of the partners. And so for those of us in the space, we know very clearly that rarely is there a, kind of a firm-wide mandate around things. Maybe, regulatory compliance is one of those. But we all run each of the silos within our respective firms. And so pushing is maybe I wouldn't necessarily say pushing, but we're certainly providing, information. We're giving them the resources, such as you and other folks, to help educate us. And I think it's a case by case scenario. For example, we have two businesses that are actually software companies, and they've been early adopters, and they have actually, in both cases, been able to literally reduce the size of their programming team because they're using AI to code. And so it is more about folks that are skilled at prompting the AI code writing applications in ways to come out with sort of immediately usable software enhancements within their software. So that's a very acute, specific use case where that is AI being applied in its purest form right now, where it's replacing people and it's doing something very specific. So we don't have to do much pushing there, but we continue to give them resources to evolve that. We have other businesses that are not inherently technical, and the cases are less obvious there. And so, it's really about working on the strategies right now and sort of convincing them that they're going to have to find ways to get in the game. So, I think regardless, we're all in with believing that it's imperative to get started, and we're doing a lot to encourage our folks to, report to us on a quarterly basis, what they're doing from an AI perspective.
It's great. And I think, honestly, personally, I was impressed what you've done with actually Trevor and myself to put, I think it was like an annual retreat, like the session that you've organized, Eric. Yeah.
Yep.
I think that was really well done. And I think it was smart to actually have Trevor as, look, I was a CEO and I've done it in my firm, with us, hey, that's our stuff. We know this thing inside and out. I think it was a good, and I don't know, Trevor, maybe it would be great to have your point of view, but it was a great way to have you, Eric, saying, I believe in the technology. You should hear more about it. Trevor, look, I've done it. Look, it's working. And us, really saying, typically that's how we would work with Trevor and, how to transform with AI. So I don't know if, Trevor, if you have a couple of points on this one.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think, like most things, AI is scary for a lot of people that aren't inherently technology-focused people because it's new and it's moving really fast. So I think the session that Eric put together was really helpful because we had a little bit more of a hand-holding into, how to start thinking about AI. You don't have to become an AI native company tomorrow, but you definitely have things within your organization that could benefit from AI. So let's start there, right? And I think you made the point of hey, sales is a great starting point, right? It's getting more sales, nobody gets upset, and if you mess something up, it usually isn't it doesn't destroy your operation or something like that. So I think it was good to give people kind of a pathway into starting to think about AI, because I think people are just getting overwhelmed by AI without any kind of understanding of where they can get value out of it. And you don't have to completely revolutionize your entire operation to get value out of AI. You can start very slowly and start to work it in from there.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, CEOs like to listen to other operators, other CEOs, and so the credibility factor is huge with that. So,
and actually, perfect transition. So, Trevor, when you were a CEO, because I think it's very difficult now to make AI a priority, and I know you did it very successfully. So, what is the silver bullet or the recipe?
Yeah, I think for us, the most important thing was basically attaching any AI initiative to a KPI, because that way we had an objective measurement that our efforts were working. And to be totally blunt, not every AI initiative we took on worked, right? And you could see it in the KPIs. And so, I definitely had, the team felt better about it. They said, hey, I'm saving so much time here. But in reality, they were just moving time from one task to a separate task, and it didn't affect the KPI at all. So we stopped working on that initiative, and that will happen. But then we did have several initiatives where we saw a pretty drastic change in the KPI, and it showed it was working, and really nobody could argue it that they didn't like it or it wasn't there. And I think that also gives an inherent incentive to the team as well, because again, most people are incentivized by some level of something to do with a KPI. And so I think, being able to really attach it to something that's real and objective, both you can see the results within the organization that you can share widely, as well as, bonuses and things like that will be attached to the performance of an AI, which again gets people a little bit more interested in learning about it and using it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, on this one, Eric, would you mind sharing a little bit the number that you got? You did a survey, and it's okay if it's and if you don't want to share, but or maybe at least because I think it was fascinating to have, and I think it would really illustrate what Trevor was saying actually.
Yep, and just for background here, we pulled together our leadership teams every year, as Fabien mentioned, and it includes always the CEO, usually the CFO and or the COO. And then we have a number of other kind of, whether it's board members or operating partners or other industry participants. We try to get, somewhere in kind of the 60 to 80 participant range. And so we had 70 people participate this year. They completed and basically an AI readiness survey. And I think the good news for me coming out of that is a very large percentage of our leadership teams view implementing AI in their business as an important thing to do, and they're excited about it. I think that number was about 85%. One of the more interesting data points, however, was that while we had that very high percentage who felt that it was critical to be thinking about AI and to get it implemented, only 12% believed that their organizations had a clear strategy for implementing. So a huge gap in readiness from that standpoint. And that's really coming out of that session, which was a few weeks ago. What we're working on, how do we close that gap? How do we help our leadership teams feel better about being ready to implement AI? I think that another big part of that gap, and one of the things that was interesting for us to pull out of the survey, was that only 15% of our teams felt that there was somebody who was responsible for driving AI strategy. So clearly, initiatives that don't have an owner have a hard time getting fulfilled. So I think that was a good learning. Half of the survey responses indicated data security as the biggest impediment to launching. So they maybe would undertake it if they didn't think that they were somehow going to be walking themselves into a cyber situation. So I think helping to protect against that is obviously one of the things that we need to bring to the table. And most surprising of all for me was that only 8%. So, we had 70 folks, you're talking about 5 or 6 people out of the group identified that customer experience was a priority use case. So clearly this group were focused on other things like efficiency and taking costs out of things, and they're not really seeing it as a commercial impact, and think that that's a little bit of a miss, and we need to sort of turn that around and find ways to get them comfortable using AI to drive commercial. So those were, I think, the key takeaways.
Yeah, and I think, Eric, you could probably correlate the fact that there's nobody driving the AI strategy and them not really seeing some of the benefits, especially on the commercial side, because, again, you need someone kind of driving it. And that gap is real. I've seen it across the industry in different ways. And I think really it comes down to the fact that people are being inundated by, AI, but internally there's sort of no one like, okay, well, how do we approach this, right? Because that's, without inherent technical kind of know-how and background, it's a little bit intimidating. So I think that's where you're seeing these gaps. People know it's important. People know they have to think about it, but they don't even know where to start. So I think that's a very important kind of point that we saw, and it came through in the survey as well.
And it's actually.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah.
No. Go ahead. Even better if it's.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, Eric. Are you using roughly the same use cases across different industries? Or is it?
Yeah, no, our portfolio is quite diverse from a business activity standpoint. Yeah. So they are not at all the same. Yeah. The same use cases. Yeah.
And it's actually a good point, Alex. We were talking with actually about House Capital, and we were trying to figure out how do you start, and we were actually shocked because for a portfolio company, never in the history you had this option of having such a high ROI, low risk opportunity, meaning you just define a use case. And we are talking with Trevor, like typically like how we work, it's like it's 6 to 8 weeks project. Honestly, it's between like in average maybe 100K, something in average, something like that. But it's like 100K, you have like at least 3 like go no go decisions. So you at the end of the discovery, at the end of like the prototype, and at the end of like the V1 or V2 of your tool. So you have 3 gates where you can stop everything. And then you can literally like replace full FTEs, or you can really generate value to Eric's point about like customer experience. So never in the history of business, you could say, I can literally like save or generate close to millions or hundreds of thousands for 100K investment that, by the way, I can stop almost at any time. So at the end of the day, if you see that it's a failure, maybe you are done like 30K, 60K max, and then you're done. Like the risk is super low, but like the uptake is, I think Trevor will explain a little bit more, but the uptake is enormous for a very low risk. It's like, I think everybody's like thinking like it's an ERP discussion. Oh my God, like doing AI will take, 5 years, and maybe if I'm lucky, it will work. It's quite the opposite of an ERP. I don't know, Trevor, if you agree on this one.
Just to give you an anecdote around this. So the 2 software businesses that we own, all it took was for a leader in the organization to see how AI could code. And they were instantly, and they are of a mindset that is more, they're looking for ways to use technology in more interesting ways. And so they were all in fast, and basically it was just like, hey, we think that this really can help accelerate what we're getting done from a software development standpoint, and this is the direction that we're going. And it wasn't really it didn't have to be a long conversation. You mean you're taking costs out of your operations? Good. Yep. Go for it. And so that was on that side. Coming out of this session that we had a few weeks ago, I had a CEO in one of our life sciences businesses who said, before the session, I was an AI atheist. Like that's how strongly he believed that it was hype. And he said, I'm at least now an AI agnostic. So he's a believer. He's not sure what he believes in, but he's a believer. And I think that hearing people like Trevor, who's been through it, and Fabien, who advises other companies, talk about the real world, aspects of getting it implemented, starts to, remove some of that mystery around it.
Yeah. And I think, Fabien, kind of to your point, as you're discussing before, one of the important things about AI is you're not actually replacing a lot of your data capabilities or your ERMs and things like that. AI actually sits on top of your existing infrastructure. So it's not hey, we have to replace our Oracle database kind of decision, which is obviously a massive decision. It's going to take years and a lot of validation. Most AI solutions, and again, kind of depending what you're doing, but most will sit on top of your existing infrastructure and data, and it just pulls data from the different locations. So it's relatively low risk and relatively lightweight compared to most IT projects that you'd be taking on. So I think, most people, when they hear anything related to computers and IT, they just assume it's this 5-year, multi-million-dollar project. And in AI, it really isn't. And so that's another really exciting opportunity, is the fact that you can try things out for relatively cheap. And tweak and adjust them pretty easily, because you're not changing your fundamental systems.
So it's been 20 minutes. I wanted to do first 20 minutes so you understand what Eric's point of view, Trevor's point of view, and our point of view. And if you're okay, I would love to open it to more like, well, Alex, thanks, you've done that already. But like, honestly, if you have questions, or like if you have some direction where you want to take this discussion, please jump in.
Yeah, I'm happy. I have a few questions. I might just, well, first quick question, Eric, if on the gains you've seen, and actually, sorry, before I ask my question, I realized I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. My name's Alex. I'm a senior associate at May River Capital, which is a Chicago-based industrials-focused private equity firm. And I'm sort of it's not an official title, but the AI lead at the company at May River, and evaluate and demo lots of different AI tools for use ultimately at the investment level or the portfolio company level. And we've rolled out a lot of tools at the investment level, but I have not worked on quite as many tools at the operating company level, and have had a little bit less success there. So certainly interested in the insights you're sharing. Now just moving my question. I guess first on the software efficiencies that you've seen, if you know, I mean, were they utilizing just a native ChatGPT to help write code for them through just natural language querying, or were these kind of specialized tools that were being brought on?
Yep. And I am not going to be able to cite just because I don't know. And they're neither of them are my platforms, but I do know how it started. And so it started with a combination of ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, being tested. Again, you're talking about a group that is eager to jump in and spend time understanding what these tools are all about. And I think so what it was basically an evolution of, can these tools really be effective? And when they landed on a resounding yes, they can be effective from a software development standpoint, then they launched in, kind of with full implementation and, basically a revised course of action with regard to staffing the programming team and the kinds of skill sets that were important. I mean, we've gone from having coders to data scientists that are skilled at prompting the AI tools. So it's more about understanding the data and what you're trying to get out of the data and just feeding that in. And I'm not sure what tools they're using for programming. I could get that, but that was what the evolution looked like.
Eric, I love how you said, understanding the data, because I think that's the key point here. So I think, when you're looking at, as Eric said about private equity groups, one. Same thing with portfolio companies, right? Every portfolio company is unique and has its own kind of way of doing things. And so I think when you're looking to implement AI, you first have to start with, what makes sense, right? Starting with the technology, like, hey, we're going to use ChatGPT to do something. It's like, it's kind of putting the cart in front of the horse, right? You really want to start with, okay, what is, in software, programming is a very good example, because that's probably the biggest use case in AI is automating software development. And so it's really kind of understanding, what is it within our organization? What do we have data to support building an AI tool? What do we have domain expertise that we can support building a tool? And first understanding what that is. And again, what KPI are we going to affect? In software development, it's very easy. We're reducing cost and software development time. But in other industries, you have to really look at, like, what's the KPI we want to adjust, and then start building the solution around that. And the technology that's needed will kind of come out of what it is you're trying to solve.
If you want to, if any of you want to have your own fun little experiment on what this looks like, you can go to lovable.ai if you're not familiar with it, and you can prompt it to build a website. Just, I want to build a website that shows pictures of my dog, playing in the backyard. And in 3 minutes, you will have a website that you can hit the button publish, and you can have a website. And so that's the kind of power that is happening with programming. When you think about what we used to do to have to create a website or a portal for something, it's just nearly instantaneous for many of those activities.
And Alex, maybe to build on, because and it will be an experience when I was at Google. So I would say it's step by step. So step one, most of our clients at the time when we started talking about AI, they took like the basic like Gemini, so or like equivalent ChatGPT, and it was like, we will give that to all our coders and they will improve code development by 20%, roughly 20-25%. And that's, for me, that's step one. And then step two, so when we were looking at internally at Google, what we were doing, we actually developed agents based on the task. So like software engineering, cloud application, YouTube cache. Like you could see like a bunch of like very specific use cases and very specific application of codes. And then you really start having this kind of army of agent, very narrow. So that's the Google thing. If you go back to the portfolio, it's the same thing. It's like step one, it's you give like as a tool, kind of like a very generic one. And then as they get better at using those generic tool, you build very specific. So like we're working with, it's like a $400 million IT company. And we develop tools for like building what they call ICD, which is really like the code explanation of like very specific app and platforms. And we build agents for the testing phase, which is like, and by the way, testing is now the biggest pain point because creating code is super fast. To be fair, it's like it's a 10x, thing. So you create code fast, but now testing is a big pain because it's creating a lot of code, but sometimes it's not that great. So you have to build kind of something very specific to really address the testing aspect. And I think that's really the future. I think the future will be like, I think you will have thousands or maybe that hundreds of agents they will be extremely precise and sharp on what code they review or what code they create or what code they build or what code they review. And I think that's really kind of the future of like how IT companies or dev companies or dev organization will behave.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I've certainly heard, and I know it's, I guess, a fact that AI applications or impact might be most pronounced in software engineering relative to virtually any other area. I don't have quite as much exposure to it because most of the businesses that we own are pretty old school manufacturing companies without often maybe without even a software engineer in the business, although I'm sure we could bring in those types of applications to business, of course. But at least at May River, we have I haven't done it too much, but some of the other associates have who have never coded before have been using Python for data analytics, just from ChatGPT. So
one of the things, just to give you an industrial use case, is this notion of digital twin. And that's a term that you can Google and learn more about. But we've used it. My background, I come out of the pharmaceutical industry, and so we've used it there for a while in drug development. But another use case, as an example, is GE uses digital twin AI technology to create virtual jet engines, and then it does things like runs that jet engine into a flock of geese. And it runs like 10,000 simulations of that digital twin hitting different flocks of geese at different angles to see what happens to the engine in that case. And it tries to find, soft spots in the engine or other vulnerabilities. So I think in kind of traditional old school manufacturing industrial scenarios, there for sure are ways that we can do things. We own a business in water treatment. And coming out of our session, the CEO and I were talking about strategies to take all of their customers' equipment that we feed chemicals into to make sure that they don't they don't scale up and they're not otherwise degraded by algae or other things that can get into these closed loop systems that fluids are running through. And you can take each of those systems and you can feed it into AI, and you can just have AI tell you immediately, like, what are the most common breakpoints? What are the kinds of things that are going to be most impactful? And it changes the dynamic of what the team that goes out to, sort of test the chemicals. Think of like if you have a pool in the backyard, we just do that in an industrial setting, right? And so we're testing the chemicals, but in advance of that, we can come out and all of a sudden be that much more consultative to those clients. And so, I mean, I think there's all kinds of ways that it will start to, find its way into, more traditional kind of businesses.
Yeah, no, Eric, I think that's a good point. And like looking at industrials, I mean, they, especially if they've been operating for 10, 20 years, I mean, they have just a treasure trove of unique data. And you can use that data to create AI solutions to get ahead of, maintenance contracts, things like that. I mean, you can really start to very accurately anticipate exactly when something may go down and get ahead of it and things like that. And so, similar to water treatment, you can just give your operating team almost special powers when it comes to understanding, how the things within their organization work, because you just have so much data on which to train an AI model with.
Yeah,
Perfect.
makes sense.
And any other questions?
I guess. Oh yes, continue.
Oh, thanks, Alex. Hi, everybody. My name is Gino. Thanks again for kind of setting this up, Fabien and Eric and Trevor, for your time. My firm, Granite Creek, we're, I would say, like, at the early innings of like our AI journey, or however you want to frame it up. And Alex, similar to you, have been tasked with kind of, rolling out the different tools and kind of helping advise the company on which direction we should take it. We're currently using like ChatGPT Pro and business things. I think the next layer of things are going to be like NDA processing. And so I just was curious for the group here, are you using an AI tool to, automate your NDA process? Kind of what was that journey like? Any words of wisdom as I communicated up the chain of command?
Yeah, I mean, that is one of our few use cases. I mean, we all know private equity. It's a little bit more do as we say, not as we do.
Sure.
And so we also are, slowish in rolling things out internally. But NDA processing is one of the areas that we're experimenting with. We went in a very short period of time from doing it ourselves internally. We kick it to the associate or whoever the right person was in a specific thesis area, to Entra. And Entra is an outsourced, I think those of us in the space know who Entra is, so they're an outsourced group. Entra itself uses AI. It's not all people, so they're very efficient. And now we're using just dedicated. We're starting to pilot dedicated AI tools. So same. We're in the early innings, but I think it's a natural. I think that once somebody just sees how fast and how good it is at flagging the things that you need to focus on, doesn't really take much convincing, but what is interesting is I think there's a process science around this. So for example, if I were to take the NDAs as they come in and independently just kind of feed them into an AI tool, and then it spits out the feedback, and then I deal with it, at the end of the day, it doesn't really save that much time on a per NDA basis. But if you take all the NDAs that come in, let's say over the course of 2 days, so you have 5 or 10, and you take all of those at one time and you feed them in, then all of a sudden you actually get some efficiency. So you have to think about, and we're primarily right now thinking about it from an efficiency standpoint. I think there will get to be a point where we will consider AI to be a compliance tool, where we're able to train the agent to look for certain things that we just can't live with, and we want to make sure that we're not letting something fall through the cracks. And that'll be where we get. But right now, our focus is just, is it just going to help from a time management standpoint?
Eric, you mentioned something in there that I'd be curious to get your thoughts on, and Trevor as well. When it comes to like AI use, there's really three different ways, and it's kind of the spectrum from ChatGPT, right, where I'm just going to use the generic model for everything that exists. And then on the far end of the spectrum would be I'm going to wait until whatever software vendor creates, a tailor-made solution for exactly that use case, right? Like, so I'm going to NDA, there's going to be a company that just does NDA processing. And then in the middle, you have kind of what Fabien and Sparkwise does, right? Where they're building these custom agents for companies. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on what kind of frameworks or thought processes we should have when we're helping our clients kind of identify when they should just use the generic version or they should wait for the specialized solution, and when we should be kind of going after the Sparkwise, custom model example.
Well, that is, that is the key question. Back to you've met one firm, you've met one firm. I don't think that there is a categorical answer. I would say we all like the easy button. Across private equity, if you can make it easy and fast, then it makes it easier to consume for us and put in play. But I think that as this ecosystem, this AI ecosystem evolves, we're going to, for example, it's a regulated environment, and we're going to land on things we already have, right? Where we can't just use generic versions of ChatGPT to feed a sim into to get reviewed, right? That all has to be contained with, you can, but you'd be bumping up against some, things that the SEC probably would be super thrilled about. And so I think that as the regulatory environment changes and as we all become more sophisticated, I believe what we will see is almost like a barbell dynamic, where there will be certain things that will just become so commoditized, like NDA processing, that will be a specific application. And there will be other things that, because of the regulatory dynamic, it has to be locked down and it has to be bespoke and internal, that will have to get created on a firm by firm basis. And what each of those are I think, again, it'll be very evolutionary.
Yeah, I completely agree with Eric on that. But I think when it comes to looking at what's the right solution for your approach, I think you have to do a little risk versus reward math. At the end of the day, if it's low risk, high reward, that kind of leads you in the direction of a tool. But if it's something where you're going to have a high reward, but there's a lot of risk, that's where you probably don't want to be using a publicly available tool, or maybe look to bring in a group to build it for you. So it's really kind of understanding what are the dynamics of your risk reward for that particular application you're looking at. I think where this kind of like middleware where Spark comes into play and where they're so useful is being able to utilize your internal data that you don't want to share with the rest of the world. I think that's an important aspect of making sure you're protecting that data, making sure you're staying under compliance, but still getting some tools in place that allow you to automate and get a lot of value out of that. And there's typically not a vendor that's going to be selling a tool specific for that. So that's where that kind of middle ground really comes into play, in my experience.
To come back on what Gino was asking and what Eric and Trevor was saying, the NDA is a perfect example, because you might think the NDA is a problem, but actually the problem is everything around the NDA. So like one thing that we've done that was super interesting, and for the NDA, but I think, we talked about it in Chicago, I would say, all like use a third-party provider, because this is very generic. You don't want to build your own tool. So, but what we've done, we've created kind of like an automation aspect. So when you get an NDA, when you send an NDA, you actually like CC an email that is dedicated to NDA. So NDA at, your pfirm.com. And then you start like an automation process. So like when you send it, so as soon as you will get an answer back, it will be analyzed, store, countersign, store somewhere. And that's where it's from Eric's point, that's where you save a lot of time. It's not just like you take your NDA, you put it in an email, and then, you send it. But now it's like the entire process, like all your NDA at once, like it's completely automated. You send it and then you don't have to think about it. And then it's easy to find, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the value is really kind of like automating the full process using agent as a partner. And I think you need to build that because every firm is different, and you want to store somewhere, you don't want, you, et cetera, et cetera. Those rules are custom. And I think that's where it makes sense to build this kind of workflow on your own, but use kind of like a third-party NDA AI solution. And I think that's where, like, like combining both, it's really, really efficient.
Yeah. I mean, one of the problems I'm running into is like just different level of understanding of AI. And I'm not the ultimate decision maker. And so communicating that to different people that are going to be making that decision is kind of where I'm falling short. And NDA for me, granted, I'm the one that does the NDAs. So of course I'm the one that is going to want to automate those things.
Yeah.
But it is just a huge time saver. And to be honest, like not a value added part of the process. Some of the things I've heard is that NDA is like good exposure for a junior employee to like legal documents. And I agree. That makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of things in there that, will help when you're a director and helping draft the purchase agreement and so forth, credit agreements too. And so I get that point of view, but at the same time, there's just like, time is, a finite thing. And in our industry, we're trying to protect our resources. And this is just a really easy one to just put on the chopping block, outsource it and make it a little bit easier. And the thing I propose is, hey, if we hire a new person, let's have them do the NDAs for 3 months. It'll really ramp up their experience. So there's ways around it. And again, talking through this has been great. Fabien, I didn't even think about having a designated inbox for the NDAs, which makes a ton of sense. You get an NDA come in, send it to this inbox, and then the inbox has an agent that we're gonna not use Entra. I've had battle scars with Entra, so it has a bad taste in my mouth. But we have a firm that we're working with called NDA OK, and it couldn't be more streamlined, couldn't be easier. And if there's a dedicated email inbox, it'll be even easier, which is surprising to me. So
one of the other reasons why we had associates doing NDAs is because it also gave associates an opportunity to deal on a regular basis with counterparts in the investment banking side of things. But more and more, they're using Andra or NDA OK or AI tools. And so, I don't think it's going to be too much longer where that's not even really part of it anymore, because it's going to be automated on both sides. And you just need to that's just one of those things that will happen. So, your guys will get there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's an inevitability. The one argument that I heard that I do agree with is it's kind of your first interaction with a counterparty. In that, like, with this whole move to AI and like automation and things like that, I think there's just going to be a shift to like authenticity and like actually dealing with a human at some point. And this is kind of like your first opportunity to make that connection. Granted, there's not a lot of information shared, but people like doing deals with people that they like. And this is kind of your first opportunity to, show that you're human, show that you're like authentic. And automating the whole thing, I'd be surprised. But automating just the redlining process, like the review of it, I mean, that's easy.
Yeah, I just had 2 very quick comments. I think one, I use NDA OK, and I process probably 150 NDAs a year. And it's cut my time down by 80%, I would say. So it's been one of the major AI use cases at the investment firm level for us.
I think they're largely using AI, right?
Yes, they are.
NDA, right.
And there are humans involved too, but they're largely using AI, and then a human checks it, flips it back to you. Then just one point on the because I think this is potentially going to be very big for our firm. So one of multiple people have mentioned compliance concerns around ChatGPT, which is a big issue at our firm. Ultimately, we've rolled out what's called ChatGPT Business. You need, I don't know what the minimum number of seats, it might be 2 to 5 or something like that. And this might be new, I'm not sure. They used to have a platform called ChatGPT Enterprise, but now they've released this thing, ChatGPT Business, which is a closed loop ChatGPT doesn't train on your data and apparently doesn't release any of your external data. We rolled this out a few weeks ago, and now I've been dropping purchase agreements and other documents that can be shared externally and querying it on those. So that's been a big, I think it will be very impactful for us. And ultimately, I'm attempting this right now. We'll see how it goes, but you can connect it to SharePoint, which has our file server on it. So we're going to attempt to natural language query file server and use it for, I don't know if this will work. I spoke with someone at OpenAI who claims it will, but we're attempting that through ChatGPT Business. It's like $30 a month per person. You need a few seats minimum at your organization.
That's a great tip. Thank you.
No, honestly, I'm sure it will work. Honestly, even the way it's working, I think it's going to work. And it's funny because I think that's where a PE firm is very different than your portfolio company. You are lucky because usually it's like you are working on like OneDrive or SharePoint. You don't have many ERPs. You don't have a logistics software that is from the 80s. You don't have, like a factory system that is from the 60s or, like those crazy things. I think that's where it's complicated to use AI when you have like all those software and you need to kind of custom make things. But honestly, I agree. If you have like a big SharePoint and maybe a big OneDrive and something on Box and like you just connect your ChatGPT like enterprise or business account, and honestly, it's doing pretty good.
Yeah, because that's something we've explored doing before with other firms. I wasn't aware that you could do it through ChatGPT. We'll see how it goes. I'm gonna attempt it next week. I'm sort of clearing it for compliance, but before doing it.
I definitely want feedback on that to how it works, because obviously that would be a great opportunity for people if it is successful.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the use cases that we're trying to use for querying documents and then retrieval of documents from keywords, which is something we struggle with. So we've got that information we'll have all our investment team information. I would say on the portfolio company side, it's more disparate data sources and so harder to aggregate in one place, but we are in the early stages of trying to pull out into a repository, portfolio company data as well, which is very challenging, very hard sort of problem to solve. But ultimately, ERPs, other things, get it all into one centralized location for a whole, 15 different companies, but all come to us. And then possibly be able to utilize that data with AI.
Nice. You always impress me, Alex.
Well, I think they're to that point, pulling out and getting all ERP data in the same format that's all usable and you can compare, financials across things in the same format. Doing that is incredibly hard.
That's one of the biggest challenges in AI. Yeah.
Yes, and this may be unsuccessful. We've spent a lot of time on it, and I don't know, and I know that there are other firms that are trying this as well, and I've heard a lot of people having significant challenges doing this. So very expensive, time consuming, it might not work, but trying.
If you don't do it, at least you will be more advanced than a company who didn't do it, which didn't do it. So.
And if you don't get every company, but you get half your companies, or at least you get some of a head start and more insights from that, right? So even a 50% solution is better than what you have today, right? So I think it's looking at what you actually get out of it at the end of the day. But no, you've just kind of identified one of the biggest challenges in doing AI across a large enterprise or multiple enterprises is just the data from so many different sources and so many different formats.
Yeah, definitely.
We have 8 minutes left. Any other questions?
I had one quick question for Trevor. And maybe first, when you were CEO, what industry do you specialize in, or are you kind of across the board in terms of types of companies you work with?
Yeah, so I work with all types of companies. I mean, my background is in healthcare, but I mean, I've worked with some of my clients are, you know, completely outside of the healthcare space. So I've worked across industries.
I guess just you know, maybe what are the, if you're able to sort of condense this, what are the, you know, biggest operating company use case that you've seen for AI?
Yeah, so typically outside of kind of the obvious, just, you know, automating document and things like that, you know, the biggest time savings I've found is agentic approaches to compliance and quality. You know, typically companies will have years of, you know, documentation on you know, things that went wrong within the organization, you know, how they approached it, what they did with it. And you can train an individual AI agent that will typically take on your, you know, all of your different compliance challenges and issues. I mean, usually, you know, a non-compliance is everybody's worst nightmare to deal with. And you have to deal across organization and across different departments to kind of get it resolved and move it forward. And obviously, the longer it's not resolved, the more it kind of dings your quality score, things like that. So I found an agentic approach to quality, particularly on non-conformance events, has just saved an amazing amount of time and energy, really in anything, because, you know, this is used a lot in like lab companies where you know, have a lot of lab stuff that happens where things go wrong, industrial type applications where you just have a lot of machines and things like that where things can go wrong. Where compliance to, you know, conformance of equipment and process is a really big deal. An agentic approach to that has, I mean, it's saved like probably 5 or 6 employees in some cases of time of people who had spent full time just chasing down compliance challenges and making that all automated. Is pretty easy because, again, usually you have, you know, several years of history of what happened, what they did about it, what the solution was, and agents can start automating all of that for you.
Got it. Thank you. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean that there, you know, obviously each industry has specific things, but I think that's the one I found kind of that's worked across a lot of different groups, because it's just it's an issue that everybody sees. It's kind of, you know, quality is one of those like non-sexy things, but everybody needs it. And the more you can kind of automate it and just less time on you know, adverse events that people hate dealing with, the just more efficient you get across the organization.
All right. Well, I thought we would finish way earlier, but I'm glad to see that level of engagement. So again, if there is no other question, again, a huge thank you, Eric and Trevor, especially because it's Friday. So again, thank you so much for your time and commitment, and thank you everybody for joining. And again, I will try to organize those kind of things. I will try to do it monthly if we can, and if we can find time. But if you have any idea of something that would be useful, you know, I will try to extract the transcript and build kind of a quick chatbot, and I will put that on the platform. So if you can like go inside and ask questions and like interact with the transcript, that could be an easy thing. And yeah, and I will continue to try to organize those kind of things. But feel free to reach out if you see any other thing that could bring value to you guys.
Great. Thanks so much, Eric and Trevor. Thank you very much for your time. Very
Alex, say hi to Chip for me. I was golfing with him in Ireland a couple of months ago. So
will do.
Anyway,
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. All right, everybody. Thanks. Good.
Thanks everybody for your time.
Good ideas.
Have a great weekend.
Appreciate it.
Thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.